Did you know that hundreds of successful people have shared their stories in books, explaining exactly how they achieve success, yet so many people don't read them? How do you explain that? One book could save you 5 years of trial and error. Every successful person I know, from all over the world, is a good reader. Their curiosity pushes them to keep reading. They are always eager to learn. They just read, and read some more. I once heard someone say, if you want to hide wealth from the average person, put it in a book. That hit me hard, not because it was an insult, but because it was the truth. Most people will complain about their situation, but they won't spend an hour reading a book that could change their life. And let me tell you, life doesn't get better by chance. It gets better by change. But here's the real question. Where do you get the ideas, the philosophy, the principles that bring about that change? For me, it started with 2 little books. 2 books that looked so ordinary, yet carried the extraordinary power to change a paycheck into prosperity and change confusion into clarity. First book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, taught me how wealth is born in the mind before it shows up in the wallet. And the other book, The Richest Man in Babylon by George Samuel Clayson, taught me that gold obeys laws just as strict as gravity, and if you don't learn them, you'll always wonder where your money went. So today, we're going to unlock the very lessons that turned my lean years into prosperous years. We're going to talk about why desire is more powerful than talent, why discipline builds freedom, why money must be protected before it multiplies, and why wealth without wisdom is just another form of poverty. If you stay with me, you'll walk away with a set of principles that have been tested for centuries, principles that turn poor men rich and ordinary people extraordinary. Not theories, not fluff, but laws, philosophies, and strategies you can apply the moment you close this book or the moment you finish this talk. Before you ever open the pages of a book, before you let a single new idea enter your mind, you must first answer one question. Why am I reading this? Because if you don't know why, then reading becomes nothing more than entertainment. It's like wandering through a library, hoping the right idea will fall off the shelf and land in your lap. That's not how wealth is built. Wealth is built by being intentional, by pursuing knowledge with a purpose. When Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich, he spoke of the definite chief aim. That phrase struck me like lightning when I first encountered it. It wasn't enough to say, I want to be successful. That's vague. That's blurry. That's fog. The wealthy don't live in fog. They live with clarity. They know exactly what they want, and then they search for the ideas, the strategies, and the principles that serve that purpose. When I was young, I read books the way most people do, without direction. I'd pick one up, put it down, underline a few nice quotes, and then go back to my old habits. And guess what? Nothing changed. My income didn't change. My philosophy didn't change. My results didn't change. Then my mentor said to me, don't just read, read with a target. He told me to sit down and write one sentence that defined exactly what I wanted. Not a paragraph, not a page, just one sentence. I still remember writing mine. I want to achieve financial independence so I never again have to trade all my time for money. From that day forward, every book I picked up had to answer that sentence. If it didn't, I put it down. If it did, I studied it like my life depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. Here's the simple practice I recommend. Write your one-sentence wealth purpose. That becomes your compass. Then commit to 10 pages a day. Not 10 random pages, not skimming for good quotes, but 10 pages read through the lens of that purpose. Underline the sentences that move you closer to your aim. Ignore the rest. Don't get distracted by every shiny idea or clever phrase. Most of what's written isn't for you in this season. Look for the goal that matches your purpose and leave the rest behind. When you read like this, reading stops being entertainment and becomes transformation. One focused sentence can change the way you see every page, and 10 purposeful pages a day, over time, can change the way you see your entire life. That's the power of reading with a definite chief aim. When I first read George Clayson's The Richest Man in Babylon, there was one idea that stood out above all others. Pay yourself first. 10% of every dollar you earn should go to you before it goes to the grocer, the landlord, the tax collector, or anyone else. At first, I thought that sounded impossible. I was already spending more than I made. How could I possibly take 10% for myself? But then I realized it wasn't about the amount of money, it was about the discipline. It was about saying to myself, I come first. My financial future comes first. My wealth plan comes first. That simple shift changed everything. But here's the secret I discovered later. While the purse needs deposits, the mind does too. It's not enough to pay yourself first in money. You must also pay yourself first in ideas. Because money without wisdom slips away, but money with wisdom multiplies. That's why I began to pair Clayson's principle with Napoleon Hill's. 10% of my income went into investments, and 10 pages a day went into my mind. One built my bank account, the other built my philosophy. And when the two started working together, that's when the real growth began. Now, I'll be honest, in the early days, it was tough. Moving 10% off the top felt painful. I thought, I need every penny just to get by. But discipline is always painful in the beginning. The same went for reading 10 pages a day. Some nights I was tired, some mornings I was rushed. But what I found is that discipline eventually becomes delight. Over time, I didn't miss that 10%. It was building something for me. And I didn't dread the reading, it was feeding me. Looking back, those two small practices were the seeds that grew into an orchard. So here's what I recommend. Set up an automatic transfer so that 10% of every paycheck is moved to a separate account or investment. Don't trust your emotions. Don't wait for what's left over. Pay yourself first and let the rest adjust. And then, every day, sit down and pay your mind 10 pages. Do it in the morning before the world gets noisy, or in the evening before you rest. The combination of growing your purse and growing your philosophy is unstoppable. If you'll commit to that, 10% in 10 pages, your money will begin to grow, your ideas will begin to grow, and soon you'll look back and realize that wealth isn't built in leaps, it's built in small, disciplined deposits, both in your bank account and in your mind. That's the magic of paying yourself first while you read. When I first came across the idea of the mastermind in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, I'll admit, it puzzled me. He wrote about how two or more minds, when brought together in harmony, create a third mind, a kind of invisible power greater than the sum of its parts. At first, it sounded mystical, but then I tried it, and what I discovered is that it's not mystical at all. It's practical. It's accountability. It's perspective. It's encouragement. It's challenge. Alone, a person can get busy, even exhausted, but not always effective. Together, aligned with others, the mind sharpens, the ideas expand, and the results multiply. Let me share a little from my own life. Early on, I was reading, studying, working, and trying to apply everything I was learning. But I was doing it in isolation. I had no one to test my ideas against, no one to challenge my excuses, no one to hold me accountable. When I formed a small group, just 2 other friends who were hungry like I was, everything changed. We didn't do anything grand. Once a week, we'd get on a short call or meet in person for a half hour. Each of us shared one insight we'd picked up, one action we had taken or planned, and one ask, something we needed from the others, whether it was advice, encouragement, or perspective. That simple routine turned out to be worth gold. You see, sometimes you don't need a full seminar or a long training session. Sometimes you just need someone else to say, that idea makes sense, go do it. Or, that excuse doesn't hold up, you can do better. The mastermind does that. It strips away the noise, keeps you honest, and fuels your momentum. And the real benefit? It compounds. Week after week, small insights turn into big shifts. Small actions turn into habits. Small asks turn into opportunities you never would have found alone. So here's my recommendation. Don't just read a book and close it. Build a mastermind around the margins of that book. Pick 2 peers who are also hungry for growth. Set a weekly 30-minute call. Keep it simple. 1 insight, 1 action, 1 ask. No long speeches, no wasted time. Just clarity and accountability. Then, watch what happens over months and years. Hill was right. 2 minds aligned beat 1 mind busy. And when you align 3, 4, or more over time, you'll find yourself accomplishing things you never thought possible. The book gives you the ideas. The mastermind makes you live them. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned about ideas is this. They have a short shelf life. An unused idea doesn't sit patiently waiting for you. It evaporates. How many times have we read a book, underlined a passage, felt a spark of inspiration, and then set it aside? A week later, the spark is gone. A month later, we can't even remember why it excited us in the first place. That's because ideas, as powerful as they are, demand action to stay alive. Without it, they fade into the background noise of our lives. Napoleon Hill taught the principle of organized planning, that once you know what you want, you must quickly design steps to act on it. He wasn't vague about it either. He urged us to take what we learn, convert it into a plan, and then move immediately. I discovered that if I didn't put a new idea into motion within 72 hours, I probably never would. That's the window. Beyond it, the world intrudes, excuses multiply, and enthusiasm dwindles. I remember once reading about the importance of refining my communication skills. The insight struck me hard. I knew it could transform my career and influence. But instead of just nodding my head and thinking, that's a good idea, I made a plan right there. I found a class, scheduled the first session for the following week, and set myself the task of practicing 5 minutes a day. Within that 72-hour window, the idea moved from paper to practice. And that single decision to act fast led to opportunities to speak, to teach, to influence, and eventually to build wealth. The process is simple, but it requires discipline. Each highlight you make in a book, each note that excites you, must become a 3-step task. Who, what, when. Who will help or hold you accountable? What specific action will you take? And when will you begin? Not someday, but within 72 hours. Do this consistently, and your reading will stop being entertainment and start being transformation. Think of it like planting seeds. You don't leave them in the bag, waiting for the perfect moment. You plant them immediately, or they rot. Ideas are no different. Act within 72 hours, and you'll keep momentum alive. Delay, and you'll watch potential slip quietly away. Unused ideas evaporate. Act on them quickly, and you'll watch your life expand in ways you never thought possible. One of the hardest truths about money is this: if you don't tell it where to go, it will leave you without permission. What you don't track, you can't tame. Most people think they have an income problem, but what they really have is a management problem. You see, even if someone doubled their income overnight, without discipline and tracking, the extra would vanish as quickly as the first. That's why George Clason, in The Richest Man in Babylon, emphasized, control thy expenditures. Because if you can't master this, wealth will forever slip through your fingers. I learned this the hard way. Early in my career, I was making money, but I couldn't understand why I was still broke at the end of every month. My wallet was full of receipts, but my bank account was empty. One day, I sat down and tracked every single expense for 30 days. It was like turning on a light in a dark room. I realized that it wasn't the big purchases draining me. It was the small, unconscious leaks. Coffee here, snacks there, little conveniences that added up to more than I wanted to admit. That ledger was a mirror. It showed me the truth, and the truth gave me back control. Here's the philosophy. Don't let lifestyle rise with income. Cap it at 70% no matter how much you earn. 10% for savings, 10% for investments, 10% for generosity, and the rest you live on. If you can't manage 70% of your income, more money won't fix you. Discipline will. So here's the strategy. Keep a 30-day spending log. Write it down. Don't trust your memory, because memory edits reality. Paper doesn't lie. And then, once a week, review it. Ask yourself, did my money follow my priorities or my impulses? That simple act will change your relationship with money forever. It will move you from being a servant to money to becoming its master. When I began to track and cap my spending, something remarkable happened. For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom, not because I was rich, but because I was in charge. And that sense of control is the seedbed of wealth. Wealth is never an accident. It is always a result of deliberate choices, written down, measured, and reviewed. If you want to build wealth, don't just earn more, learn to control what you already have. Because if you don't track it on paper, you'll never tame it in life. The great danger in life is to confuse activity with progress. Hustle will feed you for today, but it is compounding that will free you for tomorrow. George Clason, in The Richest Man in Babylon, put it simply, make thy gold multiply. In other words, don't just earn, let your money earn. Too many people work all their lives for wages, yet never let their wages work for them. And the tragedy is this: when your labor stops, their income stops. That's not freedom, that's a trap. I remember when I first grasped this lesson, I was busy, working hard, chasing every opportunity. But hard work alone doesn't make you rich. One evening, I looked at my bank statement and realized something sobering. Every dollar I made had to come directly from my sweat. Nothing was multiplying on its own. I thought, what if my money worked while I slept? What if, instead of being exhausted every day, I could build an engine that produced results for me automatically? That thought changed everything. Here's the philosophy. Hustle feeds you today, but compounding will feed your family for generations. A dollar saved and wisely invested isn't just a dollar. Over time, it becomes 2, then 5, then 10. That's why the wealthy don't just spend, they invest. They understand that money has one of two roles. It can be consumed and disappear, or it can be planted and grow. And just like seeds in the ground, the earlier you plant, the bigger the harvest. The strategy is simple. Make multiplication automatic. Don't leave it to chance. Don't leave it to moods. And don't leave it to willpower. Set up a system where every payday, before you even touch your income, a portion is sent into investments. It could be a broad index fund. It could be a real estate fund. It could be a business you're building. But the principle is this: never miss a buy. Whether the market is up, down, or sideways, keep buying. Consistency beats timing, and time multiplies consistency. I call this the quiet miracle of wealth, because it doesn't shout, it whispers. Month after month, the deposits look small, even insignificant. But let years pass, and the growth becomes almost unbelievable. And one day, you wake up and realize you're not working for money anymore. Money is working for you. That's the day you shift from survival to freedom. So remember, hustle might fill your plate, but compounding builds the feast. If you want to be free, don't just make gold, make your gold multiply. One of the most sobering lessons I ever learned about money is this: it's not what you make that counts, it's what you keep. Many people have tasted prosperity only to lose it, because they never learned to guard their treasure. George Clason warned us in The Richest Man in Babylon, "Guard thy treasures from loss," and it's timeless advice. You see, return matters, but risk matters more. A fortune built over years can be lost in a single foolish move. Early in my journey, I remember being tempted by an opportunity that promised huge returns. A friend came along with a story of doubling money in just a few months. Now, to the untrained ear, that sounds like music. But to the wise, it's the sound of danger. I didn't know the game. I didn't understand the rules. And had I jumped in, I would have paid the price. And isn't that how many fall into ruin? They confuse speculation with investment. They gamble. And when the wheel doesn't turn their way, everything they've worked for disappears. That's not strategy, that's surrender. Here's the philosophy. Your first duty is not to get rich quick. Your first duty is to never go broke. Wealth isn't a sprint, it's endurance. Which means the great art is not just making money, but protecting it. That's why you need principles that keep you safe. First, never invest in something you don't understand. If you can't explain how it works to a 12-year-old, you shouldn't be putting your life savings into it. Second, always size your positions. Don't bet the farm. Put in only what you can afford to lose without wrecking your future. Remember, wealth is built brick by brick, not by throwing the whole wall at one roll of the dice. And third, always keep a buffer. Life has seasons. Winter comes for us all. Unexpected bills, downturns, illnesses. If you don't keep 3 to 6 months of cash set aside, you'll be forced to sell your treasures at the worst possible time. That's how people lose twice. Once because they're unprepared, and again because they're desperate. But if you have a cushion, you can wait, you can breathe, you can hold your ground until the storm passes. So let me leave you with this. Don't confuse courage with carelessness. Guard your treasure. Protect it like you would a newborn child. Because if you can learn to keep what you've earned, then the multiplication we talked about earlier has a chance to work. But if you don't guard it, no matter how much comes in, it will always find a way out. Wealth is not just about making money, it's about keeping money safe enough to grow. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned is that opportunity doesn't sit around waiting for you to feel ready. It knocks, and if you hesitate too long, it moves to the next door. Napoleon Hill, in Think and Grow Rich, said successful people have the habit of making decisions quickly and changing them slowly, if at all. And he was right. Opportunity hates hesitation. Most people miss out on wealth not because they weren't smart enough, but because they couldn't decide fast enough. I'll tell you from my own experience. Indecision is expensive. Early in my career, I was presented with a small business venture. I thought about it, I weighed it, I hesitated. By the time I was ready to say yes, the chance had already passed to someone else. That business grew into something remarkable. But I wasn't a part of it because I didn't decide. And isn't that the truth for so many? They stand at the crossroads waiting for certainty. But certainty never comes. What comes is a moment, a window. And if you don't move, that window closes. Now, let me be clear. Quick decisions don't mean reckless decisions. The key is preparation. If you're grounded in principles, you can decide swiftly because you already know your boundaries. For instance, I use what I call the 24-hour rule. If a clear yes or no presents itself, I don't drag it on for weeks. I decide within a day. If it fits my philosophy, if it aligns with my purpose, then I act. If it doesn't, then it's a no, and I move on. No lingering, no second guessing, no wasting energy in limbo. But here's the balance. While decisions are made quickly, adjustments are made slowly. Don't keep uprooting your plan every time you feel doubt. Wealth grows from consistency, not constant tinkering. That's why I schedule quarterly reviews. Every 3 months, I sit down, review my progress, and make refinements. Not reversals, not panic-driven changes, just refinements. This rhythm allows me to seize opportunities fast but build wealth steady. Think of it like planting a tree. The decision to plant is made quickly. You pick the spot, you dig, you put it in the ground. But then you don't dig it up every week to see if it's growing. You let it be. You water it. You give it time. And only after a season or two do you check its strength and maybe prune a branch. That's how wealth works. Decide quickly. Adjust slowly. So remember, hesitation kills more dreams than failure ever will. When the right moment comes, say yes with conviction. And when you've chosen, give your decision the gift of time. That combination, speed to act, patience to endure, is one of the greatest secrets of success. One of the greatest tragedies in life is how many people quit just inches from gold. They work, they hustle, they even sacrifice. But when the dip comes, the season where things feel harder than they should, longer than they expected, and thinner than they planned, they give up. Napoleon Hill said that persistence is the key to turning desire into reality. And he was right. Because the truth is, every worthwhile pursuit has a dip. Every dream, every business, every wealth plan will test your endurance before it rewards your effort. I can remember when I first started in business. The first few months were exciting. The checks came in, the recognition was there, the energy was high. But then the dip came. Prospects stopped returning calls. Sales slowed down. I looked at my bank account and wondered if I had made the right decision, leaving a steady paycheck. And that's when the temptation to quit whispered the loudest. But persistence, just staying in the game one more day, one more phone call, one more visit, turned the tide. A few weeks later, I landed the account that changed my financial direction. Looking back, I was inches away from walking away from it all. That's the way life works. The dip is the test. It asks you, do you really want this? And most people fail not because they couldn't do it, but because they wouldn't stay long enough to prove they could. The wealthiest people I've ever met aren't always the smartest or the fastest. They're simply the ones who refuse to break their streaks. They read daily, they saved faithfully, they prospected consistently, and when they couldn't give a full effort, they gave a shorter one, but they never skipped. That's the trick. Don't break the streak. If you can't read 10 pages, read 2. If you can't save $100, save $10. If you can't make 10 calls, make 3. Shorten, but don't skip, because consistency compounds. And when you look back years later, you'll find that the simple act of refusing to quit during the dip is what carried you to the goal that others left behind. So when the dip comes, And it will decide today that you'll persist. Because persistence isn't just holding on, it's the bridge between desire and destiny. The mind is a fascinating servant. It doesn't argue, it doesn't debate, it doesn't negotiate. It simply takes orders. The only problem is that most people never give it any. They allow their minds to wander, to soak up doubts, to replay failures, to rehearse fears. And then they wonder why wealth never arrives. Napoleon Hill taught that one of the most powerful forces you can develop is auto-suggestion. The art of telling your mind, on purpose, what it must believe and what it must pursue. He called it self-suggestion, and it's the missing piece for so many who read but never receive. When I first came across this principle, I'll admit, it sounded strange. Speak my goals out loud, repeat them daily, write down numbers before I had any proof, but I was desperate enough to try. So I wrote a short script, just a few sentences. I wrote my purpose. I wrote the amount of money I intended to earn. I wrote the next step I would take. And every morning, before the day could throw distractions at me, I stood in front of the mirror and spoke it out loud. At first, it felt mechanical, but then something started to shift. Within a few weeks, I noticed that I was walking differently. I was more intentional. Opportunities I would have overlooked began to stand out. My confidence rose, not because the money had arrived yet, but because my mind had already accepted the order. I had programmed it to search, to act, to expect. It was like hiring a full-time worker who never sleeps. Your subconscious goes to work on the instructions you repeat. This is why I say, don't just read about wealth, speak it. Don't just wish for prosperity, command your mind to believe it. Write down your purpose in one sentence, set a target number, identify the very next action step, and then repeat it daily, out loud. Speak it until you feel it. Speak it until your actions line up with your words. Speak it until your mind has no choice but to create the reality you've been declaring. Because wealth isn't just built in the marketplace. It's first built in the mind, and your mind is waiting for your orders. One of the most important lessons I ever learned was this: you don't get paid for time, you get paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. Two people can work the same 8 hours, but one earns 10 times more. Why? Because their skills, their knowledge, and their ability to solve problems are more valuable. Time is fixed. You only get 24 hours. But value, that's expandable. And here's the key: you can expand it on purpose. In The Richest Man in Babylon, Clayson makes it clear: improve thy ability to earn. That phrase struck me like a lightning bolt. I realized that if I wanted my income to grow, I couldn't just hope for a raise or wish for better circumstances. I had to intentionally become more valuable. I had to turn myself into someone the marketplace would gladly pay more. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. When I was starting out, I decided that 5 to 10% of everything I earned would be reinvested back into me. I didn't wait for the company to train me. I trained myself. Books, seminars, coaching, tools. And it was remarkable. The first time I spent money on a sales course, I doubled my closing rate within weeks. That one investment paid me back 100 times over. Later, when I learned to communicate better, my influence expanded, and with it, my opportunities. You see, every time I grew, my income grew. Think of it like this: if you can make $20 an hour today, and you learn skills that double your output, suddenly the marketplace will gladly pay you $40. If you multiply your influence, your leadership, your expertise, then 1 hour of your time could eventually be worth hundreds, maybe thousands. That's not magic. It's simply the result of compounding your value. So here's the challenge. Carve out a portion of your income and commit it to personal growth. Buy the books, take the course, find the coach, learn the tool that makes you twice as effective. It may feel like an expense, but it's not. It's an investment, and the return is always greater than the cost. If you want wealth, you have to grow faster than your circumstances. Don't wait for the marketplace to demand more of you. Decide to become more valuable now, and watch how quickly opportunity begins to chase you down. One of the greatest shortcuts to wealth is learning from someone else's scars instead of earning them all yourself. The truth is, mistakes are expensive, and when it comes to money, they can cost you years. That's why the principle of seeking wise counsel before you risk is so critical. In The Richest Man in Babylon, Clayson warned, "Seek the advice of those skilled in handling gold, not your neighbor, not your broke uncle, not the friend who's never made a dollar investing, but the man or woman who is already profiting in the very arena you're about to step into." When I was young, I didn't know this. I made the mistake of listening to almost anyone who sounded confident. And it cost me. I bought into ventures I didn't understand, guided by opinions instead of experience. I lost money, but worse, I lost time. Then one day, I decided to make a new rule. I wouldn't risk a dime until I had spoken with someone who had actually succeeded in that specific venture. That rule alone probably saved me a fortune.